Hey guys, welcome to Two Seals and a Walrus. We have an amazing episode for you today. It's a throwback because this is an episode that Ben and I did the night before we launched Two Seals and a Walrus. Before we get started, I want to let you know the Two Seals and a Walrus merchandise store is open. You can get amazing merchandise like the shirt I'm wearing, which is "This is your brain. This is your brain on psilocybin. Any questions?" I know you guys love that stuff. You can get the hats, you can get t-shirts, you can get hoodies, you can get all kinds of cool stuff. You can get mugs with our mugs on them and our logo and some other cool stuff. You can all check that out at twosealsandwalrus.com/store. And here is today's episode, which is friggin' amazing. Love you guys. We'll be back soon with some amazing guests. We're figuring out our schedules of the guests and guys, and we all have busy lives, but we're giving you awesome content as we go. Here's the episode.
Two seals and a walrus.
Today, I have another interview for you, and this one is going to be awesome. In studio, for the first in-studio guest that we have, is my friend Ben Johnson, who is a U.S. Navy SEAL retired, who was a sniper and medic. And today we're going to talk about consciousness expansion, and we're going to call this episode Consciousness After Combat. And I think you're going to enjoy this episode because we have a very unique individual in here who is into expanding consciousness after doing something that historically or typically is placed into a different bucket of, a lot of the left-leaning folks are very anti-war and very tree-hugging and very anti-military. And today's episode is going to be one of those eye-opening experiences that shows you can't put an individual into that type of a bucket because every individual should stand on his own merits. And so that's what we're going to talk about today with my guest, Ben Johnson. How you doing?
Yo. Yeah, this is good. It's exciting.
This is exciting. Now, Ben is here in studio because we're going to fire up a brand new podcast tomorrow. And so he's in staying the night. So we kick the shoes off, we're relaxing a little bit and just kind of hanging out in the studio. Hey everybody. And we're going to basically sit and have a discussion about consciousness and Ben's experience with his military career and how he made the transition into exploring expanding consciousness and how that has changed his life, etc. And so I just wanted to welcome you, sir, to our podcast studio, which you're going to be a co-host in tomorrow, which will be fun.
Yeah, it's hopefully going to be a pretty big thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like game changer.
Yeah, I think it will be because we're going to talk about consciousness. We're going to talk about our first foray into like entheogenic psychedelics and a trip into the Amazon jungle.
Your first foray.
Right, exactly. So, and we could talk a little bit about that. I mean, because you've made the rounds on psychedelics and drug experimentation and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been known to dabble.
Yeah, a little bit.
Depending on which person you ask.
Right. You don't want to, like, if you're smoking weed, you don't want to compare yourself to Willie Nelson.
Right. And if you're in the military, you don't want to do drugs.
Right.
Allegedly. But,
Yeah, so when did you start your military career? Was it like right out of high school or
yeah, kind of. I went and I was in college at Georgia Southern for like half a semester or something.
Okay.
I got sick of that shit and wanted something more.
Right. You were playing football, right?
Yeah, so, but I wasn't very good. I mean, I don't want to say that. I was absolutely fucking terrible. So, that was pretty eye-opening when you're a punk-ass kid and you think your fucking dick's so big you gotta roll it up when you're done with it. And you go down to play this badass sport at this big school, and then all of a sudden, you're like not dressing out and starting to notice that dick shrink in the mirror a little bit every time you look. It's just like, fuck. So real hit to the fucking...
You were, when all of a sudden you are amongst the best athletes in the nation.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the athlete I thought I was is a very, very, very generous understatement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a fucking asshole, and I thought I was badass as shit because I was big and fast, and I was like you're retarded when it came to actually playing football. So
right.
I didn't know the game. I didn't know anything about it. I got down there and I did not belong on that field with that caliber of athlete.
Right.
Like bar none. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I just didn't belong there.
Yeah, and so you decided to join the military and become an elite warrior.
I got told that was the baddest thing a dude can do in life by a Marine reservist, like playing poker one night, and I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do that.
Okay.
Because I was still that asshole.
Right. Yeah. You were the guy that wanted to be the exceptional dude.
Right. I just wanted to do something that nobody else could do, just so I could say that I'm better than people. You know, like it's stereotypical fucking cheese dick, like all about me kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you know, I guess that kind of ego is to be expected from a teenage male.
Yeah.
To some degree, but you know, it kind of really doesn't matter because you know, I guess what I get asked a question all the time. You know, why did you sign up, or why do you go to buds, or like, you know, why do people go, you know, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Any derivative of that kind of line of questioning. And I always tell people show up, but you know, it's pretty much the same thing for everyone, just about. And if somebody tells you something drastically different, either they're a statistical anomaly or they're just full of shit and don't understand why. But the reality is everybody shows up for some personal, selfish reason, whether it's when you know, I want to be part of the best. Like I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't a piece of shit. You know, I was as good as I thought I was. So, you know, everybody has a selfish reason to show up, and nobody ever finishes. You know, that's not going to be enough to get you through,
right?
Because it's not necessarily the most permissive training course. So it's never enough to get you through having that selfish reason. So everybody finds something a little bit bigger, or they're just so fucking insane they can't hurt. So it's impossible to get rid of them.
Yeah,
like too stupid to feel pain.
Right.
So it's one or the other. You either find a bigger reason than the selfish asshole one you showed up with, or you're just like literally too fucking dumb and tough to get rid of, period. And that happens, unfortunately, more times than probably should, but it's not really a way to weed that out.
So there's a little bit of a transition in training, it sounds like, where you go in for egoic reasons. Like you want to be that guy, and then...
But that's the allure. That's how they market it. I mean, you can't market a special unit that's supposed to be like non-overt. You know, you can't really market that. And if you're going to market something that is legitimately, literally an ass pain,
right,
nonstop, you're talking about marketing it to young, healthy, bullheaded men. So it's got to be something that looks badass.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, because you're talking about wanting to entice the toughest of the tough, who can make it through the training, but then also who maybe has the moral flexibility to come out knowing that they're going to be sent in to potentially kill somebody.
Well, I mean, I think anybody that signed up for a tier 3 unit post 9/11, I mean, they had to have known. It would be foolish to believe somebody if they said they didn't know. They make it look like a cool guy thing, and then it's like that's the allure of it. And then you get there, and it is a cool guy thing, and it's it's a really prestigious accomplishment for a lot of people. It's definitely a point of pride to some degree. And then when that's the way you identify, and until you really get like real deep in the community, you either go real deep and you harbor disdain, or you go real deep and it just becomes like the substance of your existence, and it doesn't really matter either way. So everything in between, you kind of get out. Everybody gets out.
Right.
Yeah.
So now for you, the training, what kept you sustained throughout the training? Was it like the ego thing, or did you find something in the middle that you could attach to?
I mean, so I got hurt. I had a neck injury, and I'd been paralyzed from the neck down on the left side for a little bit, and I bounced back from that. Luckily, it wasn't anything permanent, but so that first time it was kind of really abrasive and a lot to handle, is overwhelming. But then after that, I kind of had an idea of what was going on, kind of knew what to look forward to, or like what to expect, kind of knew some tricks and whatever. And then at that point, I kind of made peace with the fact that if I'm going to stay, it's just going to be painful anyway. So I made it a game. And I used to talk shit all the time, and I'd get the whole class beat. I'd get myself beat. I thought it was funny. I was living with the officer in charge of the class, and he thought it was funny too. So that didn't help, because we just feed it to each other, and we just like it was a goddamn riot. Like all the people that showed up thinking like, oh, if we play by the rules, then it'll hurt less. Like, you're it, buds, it's gonna fucking hurt. Like,
right.
The fact that you think that we're making it worse is insane, and that's actually funnier too.
Right. Even if there's absolutely nothing wrong, it's their job to find something wrong.
They're gonna make it hurt. Yeah, you might as well hurt for something you think is funny too, instead of something you can't comprehend why it's happening. Like,
yeah,
don't make sense of shit that don't make sense. Just if you're gonna be there to roll with the punches, roll it, and we did, and we had a fucking blast. So a lot of it was, to some degree, I didn't want to look across and see a weenie piece of shit quitting or not. And then me go, and then also, so that's like the ego, narcissistic perspective. Like I didn't want to be like, fuck, that fucking guy's making it. Like, I have to,
Right.
But then, for the most part, once it started going like real deep past like the point where I got injured in the first place, Hell Week or whatever the first time, then it ended up just actually started being pretty fun. It was enjoyable. Actually, in retrospect, and I think a lot of the guys that, at least in my group, my generation, a lot of guys share the sentiment that it's probably the most fun we had in our whole career. Like, that was when shit was simple. All you gotta do is show up on time. Don't be a pussy, and be able to think. And it's so goddamn simple. Like, show up with the right gear at the right time, and don't be a pussy, and you're probably gonna be all right.
Right.
Like, even if you feel I can't swim, like I'm. Like, shit, like inner city swim team, like the fucking 3-meter drown. I cannot fucking swim. Like, I swim like a fucking rock, and I got drugged to pass swim times. Like, there's no prerequisite of like stellar fitness. It's about like most of those guys actually end up disappearing anyway. So
now that's the thing, right? Because I tried out when I was in the Navy, because we share the Navy experience, and we're both Navy veterans. And I tried out, and I failed the swim entrance exam by, I don't know, a few meters, but I was like, I wasn't out of the pool at the end of the fucking time, and they were like, you're done.
Yeah, fuck you.
Yeah, you see ya. And even the guy that was ahead of me, who was actually climbing out of the pool, they sent him home, and they're like, you weren't out of the fucking pool.
Yeah, of course.
You had a fucking leg in the water, and you're done. And, they wanted to see if he'd come back, probably, and wanted to see if I'd come back, I'm sure. But
I mean, like, even back in the 50s or whatever, when you went through,
fuck you.
No, it's always been one of those things where they're not like climbing the walls to let people in.
Right.
Even when there was like a no shit presidential order to plus up the numbers in the SEAL teams, nobody was super stoked about just making numbers. So you're basically like on their time, with their energy, their effort, and trying to prove that you want to be part of their community and that you should be given a chance. They don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Dude, anytime they get a chance to be like, beat it, nerd, that's one less asshole they have to deal with, and you're just in a pool of every other one of the bazillion dudes that either tried or didn't, or, went and failed or got hurt. All the people that went there and beat up an instructor and got kicked out or all bullshit. It was just like, unfortunately, everybody just gets lumped into that group together.
Yeah, but that's the difference between you and me, is that I got in the pool and I failed and I didn't go back, and you got in the pool and failed, and then you hired like an Olympic swimmer to help teach you.
No, they hired the Olympic swimmer. They do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So they got a precursor course where they like get everybody up to speed. No, I still couldn't swim. I could barely fucking swim throughout Buds. Like, even when I was in Buds, I had to have guys like stellar swimmers in the class. I'd just grab onto their shit and they would drag me and like kick like I've never fucking kicked before. It felt like I was gonna fucking die. And I look over, we're still the last pair, and there's still people that are like casually floating faster towards the fucking buoy than I was swimming, and I was swimming like I've never swam in my life, and it was asinine, and I almost got dropped over it. It was fucking stupid, but somebody felt like I needed to be there good enough that they wanted to pull me to swim.
Yeah.
So I found somebody who was willing to play ball. I was willing to play ball, so I got pulled to complete my swim times and whatever. Yeah, made it. Yeah,
nice.
And then I didn't swim in the
right. Yeah, you didn't swim in
we didn't do any real world swimming scenarios
in your swim. A lot of training.
A lot of bullshit.
Yeah. Now, how long were you in the military? How long were you SEAL?
I was in the military from March 2007 until April 2016, so 9 years or so.
Okay. Wow. And so you were deployed how many times to different locations around the world? I mean, you don't have to share anything that's like classified or whatever, but you went like a bunch of different places, yeah?
The deployments are pretty cut and dry as far as like where the people get deployed. Every team's got their own location, whatever. Give it, some of the traveling, some of the exposure, mostly Africa and stuff, Europe and shit like that in the military. But a lot of my travel outside of that was more impactful, I guess. I mean, like that was super impactful, super beneficial to some degree. But most of the valuable like world exposure that I've had has been absent of the military, even like when I was in still.
Right.
Yeah. So like every chance I got to go on my own turn, like even when we were actually deployed, a group of us went while we were in Africa. We like left where we were at and went and did a safari, like drove ourselves with a bunch of European chicks that we found.
Right.
Great. Yeah. and then we went whitewater rafting on an island shit, and it's
cool
stuff to get away from. So like trying to stay away from the military stuff as much as possible was like the best environment there. Obviously.
Right.
Says anybody that's out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I the greatest 2 days of my military career were the day that I got in and the day that I got out.
The day you get out and then the day after. And you're like, I'm still out? Fuck yeah. It's real. I was pretty butthurt when I got out. I didn't really necessarily want to get out at the time. And it took a while for me to like fucking swallow that pill and get rid of that chip on my shoulder. Because I guess I kind of thought, like, I mean, even though, given the circumstances, I most certainly should have been at least kicked out way more. I should probably be in jail anyway, legitimately. But things come out in a wash, and everything ended up working out in my favor. Honorable and everything. So, but I didn't want to get out at first. So it was unique trying to reconcile, the change in the lifestyle from married to divorce, from active duty, and doing what I've always, at least in my mind, convinced myself was like my dream job, like being around legitimately all the best friends I probably ever had, all the time, like literally surrounded by them 24 hours a day. Like
right.
I was literally addicted to the love that I had in that community. It wasn't everything else. It was addicted to that. There's like, it's super, super authentic, intimate relationships with people that can't be cultivated in anything but adversity.
Right.
It has to be a state of vulnerability brought on by hardship. For those things.
Yeah, so. It's like, well, the whole structure is like a brotherhood that.
Yeah, it's designed that way. They put you through shit, and they expect you to go through shit, and they expect you to embrace shit, but they expect you to do it together to form this completely impossibly strong bond, because intimacy is a product of vulnerability. Like, I mean, it's got this connotation that is tied to sex or compassion or romance or whatever, but the reality is intimacy is specifically a product of vulnerability, which is why things like sex or emotional, like opening up emotionally with somebody and being like raw with somebody is so intimate, because it's vulnerable.
Yeah.
So when you see guys, like when you're pissing on each other to stay warm, or you're like guys are crying and shit over nonsense. Yeah, guys just at their worst, the guys at their best. Yeah, you see vulnerability, and so everybody's vulnerable. Everybody sees it. Everybody's there. So there is like this like intangible, unspoken, like unwritten but understood, intimate bond between all guys, and not just that job, but every kind of job that incorporates some degree of that kind of like that facet of training to any magnitude it develops. So
yeah,
that's one big thing that I missed for a while. And honestly, I mean, like whenever I think about it, that's probably the only thing that I actually miss.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's pretty standard.
Yeah, the bonds and whatnot.
Yeah, right.
But that's got to be tough for a lot of guys, because some guys get injured and they have to leave.
Oh yeah, man. A lot of guys, like, that's, I say, I was mad by getting out, or like butthurt or whatever, but like, I'm golden now. You couldn't convince me. There ain't amount of money or any circumstance you could convince me to go back. So
right.
There are guys that like literally have been thinking about that shit since they remember being able to think and live, eat, breathe, and then they just, bad roll of the dice, and now they're fucked. Now
they're not what they want to be.
And that sucks, because that's all they can think about, because it was never It was never up to them. And when things are out of your control, people tend to dwell on shit that's like fundamentally not controllable because it's a subconscious scapegoat for energy.
Yeah, it's like that relationship where, you know, she dumped you and you really like want to stay with her or whatever, and you really want to have that person in your life, and you never get over it because, you know,
you were the one that dumped her.
Well, no, yeah, right. In your situation, right? But no, but I mean, when she ends that relationship and you're just like, God, that sucks, and you know, I don't understand why, and then it's like you never can live up to your idea of who you thought you were in the relationship.
Right. It's something that's so abstract and extraordinary and unrealistic.
Yeah.
Like objectively very unrealistic, but from a subjective analysis, especially being first person in that, impossible to conceptualize as unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because it was aspiration. Aspiration isn't unrealistic.
Right.
It can't be. Otherwise, what's the point?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's gotta be attainable. It's gotta be, yeah.
Yeah.
So
like I don't aspire to be a fucking like a piece of like fungi.
Yeah.
Because that's insane. Like this.
Yeah.
That is not going to happen.
Right. So you went into SEALs for like very egoic and very selfish reasons, and then after a while that started to wane, and you were saying that you found something else to attach to, and then you started doing like a bunch of extra training and extra certifications and stuff, right?
Yeah. So I saw the value in all of the schooling that they offer.
Right.
And a lot of people will go to schools like, you know, there's like the big schools that give you accreditation and give you potentially specific jobs in a platoon. And just like some are more desirable than others. Everybody's got their own niche, what they want. But I just wanted to go to everything because if I'm going to get this, seemingly free education,
right? Why not take it?
Why not?
Yeah.
Like why the fuck not?
Yeah.
And not just that, but you're not only is it free, but you're getting paid to do it,
right.
And it's this level of education and this set of skills that's so extraordinary that, like, I mean, it'd be insane.
Right. Now you went to sniper school and you also got medic certified, right? Combat medic.
I went to probably. The joke was always because I'd go to schools when people were doing shit. I was always like as qualified as like the next E7 as like a new guy because I went to every school you could possibly imagine. I always got hooked up with good billets, even though I was a fucking asshole. I always like weaseled my way into and or around fucking borders and barriers and stuff, and I got everything that I could have wanted and more out of it. So I went to an absurd amount of schools.
Okay,
it is obscene. Like millions and millions and millions of dollars of training for. I mean, eventually nothing. I mean, at this point,
you got out, right?
Yeah, because now I'm here. But, so I do, now on the civilian side, I do like level 4 trauma, EMT stuff. Sometimes freelance or whatever. But so some stuff carries over. I do. I hate it to some degree because I tried to avoid this as much as I possibly could. Going the cliche route of just like the same shit over and over. But I got into the private security contracting world, which is just so lucrative. It's hard to not.
Yeah,
It's too easy to not do any work and get absurd amounts of money.
I mean, it would almost be negligent.
It is. It's negligent because I spent about 2.5 years being negligent intentionally.
Right.
I said I'm not going that route. I've had that route available since like day first, and I was just like, nope. If this is going to be a paradigm shift, then I'm going to try and see. I'm going to give the regular world a chance to, I guess, like show me something different, see where I can be valuable, see where I can like fit a niche, or just see what the world has to offer. See if it can woo me with something different than like fundamentally different than what I've been doing. And I managed a bar. That was pretty cool, managing a bar for a little bit, because I like to drink anyway.
Right.
So, no, that wasn't a strange community. I went true to form, since I was in the SEAL teams, I had to go on TV or write a book, so I went on Naked and Afraid, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, and then that was it was a cool, amazing experience, super authentic. Like that shows no shit legit. Like they just throw you out there, and then nobody communicates with you. Like you literally be holding like a handful of fucking cyanide. I'm seriously, like, somebody tell me that this is not okay, because I'm gonna eat this if nobody says anything. I'll just look at you like you got a dick run out of your face until you eat it. And I'm like, oh fuck, get the fucking helicopter. Like,
right,
get the medical people spun up. But you sign a waiver, so anything you do to yourself out there, you're fucked. They don't interact with you for the for the sake of authenticity, and the experience is badass. Turning 21 days in the wild with those people into 42 minutes.
Yeah.
That took some creativity, and they definitely had a pretty creative edit. But that's it's reality TV. What do you expect?
Yeah. Well, let's break that down for a minute, because not a lot of people know this, but they'll know it now. But you were on Discovery Channel's Naked and Afraid,
right?
And you went to. So this is a show that I've never seen it, actually. I haven't seen the episode that you were on. But
you're not missing much.
I'm missing a blurred penis, I'm sure.
There's only one pixel blur. It's awesome. The editor said it was the easiest show he's ever shot.
So they take a couple of people and they put them somewhere out in the wild, completely naked, right. And then you have to survive for 3 weeks?
Yeah,
right?
21 days. It's like at face value, at least from what I could tell before I did it was like a pseudo survival, like kind of social experiment kind of thing. My parents were like big into it when I got out, and I was bored. So, my mom was like, "Oh, you should go do that." No. So, one of the guys that worked at my bar was in the real world. He was having a meeting with some network people or whatever, dropped the name. It ended up tying a couple connections together. I ended up going out there and doing the whole thing. And, it's cool. They dropped us off on a deserted island, which was legit because it was the beach, and it was right in that band across the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, where we do a lot of our training. So that ecosystem was pretty familiar.
Right.
Spiny lobsters and shit like that, like sea snail, all the stuff that we kind of used to see in general in training.
Right.
So, it was a super permissive environment for me. And then...
So what did you do there? Like, you did some... You collected food and made like a farm and whatnot, or what?
Yeah, so there's like tide pools and stuff in the coral structures on the island, and I go out and get like conchs out of the channel and bring them up and leave them in a tide pool, so that there's replenish resources for them so they didn't die.
Yeah,
and then I wouldn't have to go out and look for food. And expend energy for food. Just go out every now and then and restock this giant tide pool full of like rugby ball sized conchs. But you just eat whatever, and then
nice. Now, did you cook that stuff, or
you don't have to? But I did, but I don't like seafood. So in general, I'm not a big seafood fan.
Right.
So it to me is it's like eating like a fucking like a shit Reuben versus a shit hoagie. It's like, well, all right, cool. Like, you're splitting hairs at a certain point. But for things like lobster, it's probably a pretty good idea if you don't know. Which I don't. If you don't know how to look for parasites in the flesh,
right?
I don't know fuck all about that. So I know how to rip their tail off and barbecue it, but I don't know anything about parasites. So it's a good idea to cook that shit instead of trying to wing it, eating it raw. So before we started eating the lobster that we were catching, we needed a fire. And man, people on the show were real fucking adamant about trying to do a friction fire.
Really?
Yeah. And it's weird because as many times as they've been in that environment and shot the same bullshit over 10 seasons, whatever, however many seasons, how many people, however many experts there are at fucking whatever,
right? They
should have known, like, out of the gate that environment is not permissive for a friction fire. All the wood's either petrified or saturated with water. I mean, that's just not a friction fireplace,
right?
Unless there's bamboo, which there wasn't,
right?
So that was kind of out of the window, like, right away. And I told them that, and they just really wanted a fucking bow drill thing. So we put a bow drill together and ripped on it a couple times, and then they cut it up to make it look like we were ripping a bow drill for like fucking 10 days straight and failing. So
right.
It's like, all right, whatever. They gotta design some struggle because the rest of it. Yeah, they kind of made it hyped up a little bit of the pain, but
so non-reality TV basically.
Yeah, well, they couldn't just show us like kicking back, eating fucking lobster and conch, which are like delicacies, and just like lounging around naked on a beach in fucking paradise for 3 weeks.
They couldn't.
They couldn't.
They couldn't give you the Navy SEAL props, huh? Like we showed up on the beach to survive for 3 weeks, and I made it look easy.
Yeah, no. So they didn't want that. They want people to hurt, and they want it to look relatable, and they want all the people that live the sedentary lifestyle and get upset over every troll online's comment or whatever. They want those people to look at us and be able to relate, human to human. So, whatever, that's fine. I signed a immediate release. I knew full well what could be and what could be. Right. And it was par for the course.
So
whatever.
So basically, you went out there, you made it look easy. You started fires with like a magnifying glass or something, right?
Yeah, so we were the first. We were the first ones to start a magnification fire in the show, and
now what lens did you use to do that?
Right, so Sarah brought. She was my partner. Sarah is an awesome chick from Hawaii. She's a dive master in Hawaii. She's great fucking partner to have and everything. Super nice chick. But one of the first conversations. Sorry, Sarah, I gotta ghost you on this. One of the first conversations we had, we were talking about magnification. She had brought that specifically for the bifocal lenses in her dive mask, right? To maybe make a magnification fire. Great idea. I've never made one in the wilderness, but I was like, yeah, maybe if we stack them on top of each other. She's like, that's not how it works. I was like, I don't know. I've never done it before. She's like, yeah, I researched it. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. So I kind of like wrote that idea off, and then. I didn't think we needed a fire, but that's like one of the points they want. Right. Like we could have just not had a fire the whole time, and I would be chill with that. It's like 90 degrees anyway. Right. Like, yeah. Even in the fucking hurricanes and shit, like it was just. Yeah. It's not a fire environment unless you're cooking. So
right. You don't need to scare away any wolves.
all the water was fresh anyway. Like all the yeah exactly. And you scare away all the fucking crickets on the island because it's about the only thing living. So fast forward to when we're finally deciding to make fire so we can eat some of this fucking lobster. And we're trying out the magnifier, and she's got one lens, trying to get the angle right, trying to catch high sun, whatever, this, that, and the other. Yeah. And then I found a place where lightning had struck the island before, like over like on the other end of it. There's a bunch of charcoal and stuff, so I took a side of a coconut and a piece of that charcoal and ground it up to like a real fine powder. Took some husk from the palm tree, like rolled it on a rock little bits, was like a caveman cotton ball kind of thing, and then saturated that with the charcoal. That's what they call charcloth, and you can actually buy that shit at like REI and stuff, but it's really easy to make, and it takes that charcoal takes an ember really quick, right, at a really low temperature, so that kind of closes the gap between the amount of energy needed to harness, right, and the amount of energy that being received by this, like really closes that gap. So
easier to start a fire with.
Yeah. So she's digging around with that, and I'm trying a lens. We tried it at different times, different days. And then, out of the blue, I guess she got a wild hair press and decided to stack the lenses and like started smoking. And I was like, oh, sweet. So we got high sun, started the fire, set it up, and then they cut that up to make it look like she just did it while I was laying around being a fucking turd. Of course, not even my idea, obviously. And then they're trying to make it look like I was pissed off because I didn't start a friction fire I didn't want to start in the first place. Right. That I told them wouldn't work. That we staged filming. And then they tried to make it look like I was pissed that I couldn't do that, but she got this fire that I told her. Yeah, whatever. Right. Yeah.
So they kind of turned you into a dick.
But they played up this. They played up this like veteran, like broken, all this bullshit narrative. Like I needed some kind of help reassimilating to society. It's all bullshit, and they just made it look like I was like this cold, callous turd, and no disrespect to her, but like this 20-nothing-year-old young girl like was able to coerce some affection or some kind of like sentimental value out of my personality over time. Right, they just had a narrative. They had their
little story.
They had their story they drew, and
that's why they took 21 days to put together a 45-minute show, right?
Right. Well,
42 minutes or whatever it is.
So actually, even after the shoot, they had to come back into a studio and re-record some audio that they didn't necessarily get the best of. And I was like, all right, cool. We had a lot of wet mics. Okay. Very realistic. Yeah. And when I went in the studio, they had these set of lines they wanted me to say. And I looked over them and I was like, okay.
I never said this.
I was like, I see what you guys did here because these are like these are like bits and pieces of different sentences that I either have or would say.
Yeah.
And they're totally out of context and jammed up like a really bad DJ Khaled remix or something. Like, I was like, I wouldn't say that. And so I refused to say some stuff, and then they chopped some stuff up in the show. It was silly.
Yeah.
They had their own intention, but nevertheless, all tangent about the show aside, like it was actually a really good like experience to get out there and set up a permanently sustainable lifestyle with literally nothing but a fixed blade and a dive mask. Like that's pretty fucking awesome.
It's pretty fucking badass if you ask me, about being able to land on an island with nothing besides a few items that you're allowed to bring with you, and then surviving for 3 weeks in the wild with nothing.
Oh, we could have stayed out there forever, man.
Well, I'm sure you could have.
Forever.
I mean, well, you have some specific training that allows you to be able to get there, though, right?
Yeah, because I wouldn't have just like collapsed under the circumstance and given up and died.
Right.
I wouldn't have just laid there and died.
Right.
But that's the only difference. That's like, I don't want to say it's even an edge. That's just a common sense thing that people overlook.
Right.
Like, you're either gonna stay alive or you're not. You figure it out. Like, at a certain point, if you spend enough time in nature, you either figure the fuck out or lay down and die. Most people just lay down and die.
Right, like the couch potato guy from Ohio who's going to be watching the show every week, he would probably lay down and die.
But he lives vicariously through the show, and that's why they wanted to be relatable, which is why they manufacture or fabricate some kind of like semblance of strife or struggle, and then they people like to see a chronological progression or some kind of a narrative where it's a survival show, but it's not. It's a story.
Right.
So where a story is fundamentally, a story requires like a protagonist,
right,
and some dynamic character development and some trial and tribulation, and then resolution,
right.
So you take away the trial,
right,
you take away
the challenge,
and then it's just people out there doing survival stuff and living a fucking dream vacation, and they don't really jive with all the jackasses that are living vicariously. They're like, yeah, if I could just sit here and do this couch potato lazy turd shit out there, and it's that easy, like, what am I watching this show for?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like, without condoning or condemning, I totally understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. So then, let me shift gears for a second.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we went off on a fucking wild tangent, making fun of goddamn Big and Afraid.
So just recently, we took a trip to the Amazon jungle, and we experienced some entheogenic psychedelics in the tea of ayahuasca and some toad venom as well. And that was really cool stuff.
Frog.
And frog venom, right? And that's some really cool stuff that we're going to talk about in the future, and especially on the Two Seals and a Walrus podcast. But that wasn't your first foray into chemical exploration or drugs, if you want to call it that,
right,
or whatever. Like, you'd had experiences previous to that in your life that you'd experimented with different substances.
Yeah, I've dabbled in the self-education realm of pharmaceuticals.
Right. Now, when did that start? Was that still when you were in the military?
Oh yeah. So prior to the military, I was still into the God's gift to sports complex, where I was gonna be the goddamn NFL star and all this shit, play safety for fucking whatever. Yeah. So I didn't drink and didn't smoke any of that shit, but then I think when I got hurt in Hell Week the first time, it was the first time I drank. And pretty much from that point, it was like all, I guess, uphill.
Yeah, right. Now, did you do steroids and stuff in high school?
Oh, no. So, there's a lot of like ideas and concepts and like theories behind kids getting juiced. And it does happen. It's super, super rare.
Right.
It happens in college to some degree, but they crack down on it so hard that even like some endocrinologists that were in the shady side of the business, like the shadow realm of their practice, supplying those and managing that, that process, I guess, safely. Those people were trying to get away from that world because of the sheer magnitude of the crackdown. It's too risky, and a lot of them wanted to shift gears towards something that's not necessarily like a moral conflict, like. in sports, it's supposed to be a level playing field. It's supposed to be a measure of like someone's mettle against another's in a competition battlefield.
Right.
When you're talking about the the nation's war fighters, it's nobody here gives a shit what they do if they come home.
Right.
I mean, from a moral standpoint, obviously the government has their legal regulations. There's obviously rules and codes of conduct to adhere to if you plan on maintaining gainful employment with them,
right,
or just not being in jail or whatever,
Yeah,
but
like there's certain lines you can't cross.
But there aren't anybody like sitting there and being like, oh, put an asterisk next to America's fucking World War II victory because they had HGH. Like nobody gives a fuck.
Right.
A win's a win at that point.
Right.
This is not a morality contest. This is not anything. This isn't for fucking records. This is specifically for one task, and it's to not die. So, in that world, it's a lot more. It's a lot more
permissible, or
yeah, it's a much more permissive environment for that kind of thing to exist and kind of unfurl, and it's a bittersweet thing because there's a ton of information about those chemicals online,
right?
But almost all of it is under the pretense of like a bodybuilding forum, which is notorious for abusing the substance. It'd be like somebody who's never drank before trying to find out the best bar to go to or the best kind of alcohol to drink or the best like methodology for drinking alcohol or whatever,
right,
from a person who's like almost on their deathbed from alcoholism,
right?
Just asinine.
Yeah.
So there, the difference between effective and therapeutic use and abuse is a very, very, very there's a broad gap, and it's just because of the legality surrounding it, because of the stigma surrounding it, and because of the medical ethics that we're required to adhere to as far as like testing and whatnot. There is very little information, very little valuable or valid information circulating.
Right.
So it looks like a lot of people get their information when they take that step out of the I don't give a fuck about the morality of it. I'm gonna go to work and do a set amount of effort. I'm going to put in this amount of work regardless of circumstance.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Why not increase the yield?
Yeah.
And when people take that step and they decide to do that, they go and self-educate because they can't talk to anybody about it, they lose their job, whatever, yada, yada.
Right.
And then they go and fuck themselves up to, stacking things the way bodybuilders say they would if they were trying to fucking bulk up and then immediately cut down for a competition.
Right.
And then they attribute things like bulking or like cutting to a chemical that binds with androgen receptors, which is fucking insane.
Right. So you think, now, this will be just your opinion, obviously, do you think the military should get more in line with assisting elite operators with performance-enhancing drugs?
Unfortunately, as much as I'd like to see that happen, just because of the quality, like gains and benefits that accompany that concept.
Yeah.
The nature of that world, from a cultural standpoint, is just so difficult to manage,
right,
that it would be very, very, very imprudent for them to allow it. Like you're talking about guys that are very like inherently difficult to regulate, control, or whatever otherwise.
Yeah.
Guys that are going to cut loose and enjoy themselves, like guys go out and drink and stuff, have fun on their off time or whatever. Work hard, play hard. There's got to be some balance. You're gonna work them this hard, you're gonna see the opposite and equal reaction. You're going to see these guys going out and having a good time, and I think they've done a pretty good job of managing the recourse for that, like all the backlash from their behavior. And guys are getting better about watching their behavior and stuff, But the reality is there's got to be balance. So guys are going to be out having a good time because they're going to be working hard, so they're going to be playing hard. You start mixing stuff that requires a 24/7 adherence to very strict, very regimented lifestyle, right, on top of that workload.
Right.
You're either going to work guys into collapse, or you're going to have guys, have aneurysms or,
right,
fucking bad blood clots, heart attacks, shit like that. Like life-threatening side effects.
Right.
because they're drinking and taking a chemical that thickens their blood by overproducing red blood cells to increase their VO2 max when they're actually operational. But they couldn't just not drink.
Right.
They had to go out and party.
Right.
And a couple of drinks just ended up clotting their blood in a small capillary, which happened to be in their brain where most of them are. And then now they're dead.
Right.
Because they just,
Yeah.
Because of the natural balance. So I'd love to see it, but I think it's appropriate, not legally or whatever, but it is definitely a possibility for appropriate for some people.
Yeah.
I personally, I haven't ever seen anything adverse come of it.
Yeah.
For myself or anybody that I know that's had any experience with it. But we're also operating under the whole umbrella of due diligence,
right,
and very carefully monitored.
So you did a lot of research into the science before you did.
Yeah, I had a close friend as an endocrinologist. I got a lot of information, and I started learning anatomy and the physiology behind it, and just as much as I possibly could about what, from a physiological standpoint, what's going to occur. Yeah. And then comparing that and putting that in the same frame of reference as what's actually occurring at this escalated, super elevated level of work output, both physically and mentally, that's required from a work standpoint.
Yeah.
So those two things have to be referenced together, like in tandem. One can't be ignored while the other one's looked at, or vice versa. That's how people die. So
right.
I spent a lot of time looking into that, and then slowly getting involved, and then it ramped up to the point where, probably legitimately, you could probably ask anybody in the East Coast, because he'd be like, at least during my period, if you want to go through like a illicit drug process, performance enhancing, whether it be hormone, pro hormone, synthetic hormone, whatever. Hey, like everybody would come talk to me about it. Everybody did that
because you knew the science.
Everybody from way high up, which is probably not okay, and then down to like the newest people. And I would, and I'd gladly share information for educational and harm reduction purposes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you want your guys around you. I
want them safe because they're multi-million-dollar assets. They're going to keep me safe. Fuck yeah, of course I want them safe.
Yeah,
and I want them to the maximum potential.
Yeah. So was that your first foray into drugs? Period. We'll just use that blanket term.
Yeah. So drugs would be a blanket term for anything that's got a psychosomatic response or physiological alteration from an external chemical.
Yeah. So was that your first foray into? Was that your first drug that you would put into your body?
I guess drinking was. Okay,
so alcohol.
And then I started smoking because it looked cool.
So then cigarettes.
And then what else?
What was next after the cigarettes?
I know. I got to think about that.
There were so many.
Fuck, man. Yeah. At a certain point, it started being like a waterfall. I just started doing everything because fuck it. Yeah, I'm thirsty for knowledge, and if I want to obtain perspective, why not obtain as many altered state perspectives as you can? That gives you really, really good insight into yourself.
Plus you're in this job where you're an elite operator, and I mean, you're one of the best in the world at what you do. And you have all this elite training, and you're expected to perform at a very high level, and you're sent on literally life or death missions. So, I mean, there's probably a little bit of, management, or not necessarily, it's like self-medication or whatever, but there's a stress relief valve.
It's funny you say that, because a lot of the stress relief comes from a completely different world than the drugs, but that's very common misconception. People think that these guys are coming back and having issues, or like a byproduct of the work is the stress, and that these things are non-advisable, illegal, self-medicating steps, and they're just not. Like, more times than not, guys are interested, they're thirsty for knowledge to some form or fashion, or they're just at the whim or at the mercy of circumstance, or whatever. It's never, at least in my experience, I've never seen guys just doing drugs to do drugs and not be part of the world. Like, actually, most of those guys love the fucking world they're in. Yeah. They just want to break from the work, and so they get together. And then when they get together, that's when shit gets weird because there's one asshole like me who's like, dude, drugs are fucking great. And then everybody else is like, well, I mean, he's not retarded and he's going to keep, he's obviously not doing anything unsafe. So then everybody tries, and then everybody's doing drugs and it's like, holy fuck, right? Now this thing gets like totally spiraled out of control.
Right.
Yeah. Because, the way I look at it and the perspective I'm coming from is completely different than what they probably think or what most people see, whatever. So irresponsible or cavalier, reckless, whatever, yeah, maybe. But it's the way my life was. Anybody part of it kind of understood that, and either it was in or out. Yeah.
Well, there was a documentary done that I haven't read about it, but I just heard about it, and I want to see it because the documentary filmmaker was approved by the U.S. military and by the Marines to go over and be with the Marines and be embedded, and he was over. Was that the one that was where he filmed like a bunch of stuff that the military didn't want out, but then he found some loopholes and basically just like they were smoking weed over there in Afghanistan on a regular basis, like on a daily basis?
I think it's called Obscura.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so I'm interested in that because a lot of guys over there who I've talked to say, yeah, that's how it was. Right. We're over there and we're bored, 95% of the time, and there's not a whole lot to do, and there's no military contact.
I can't speak on behalf of everybody. I think that would be irresponsible of me,
right?
Especially I harbor no ill will towards the SEAL teams or anybody in it. No resentment there. So I would never look to degrade that value or that anything. To any magnitude whatsoever. But that's not the U.S.
True.
There's things that happen in other countries, any other country, that are things that are normal for us. There's things that are abnormal for us. There's things that are borderline, like, pensive of an experience because I'm not sure how I feel about that. And then there's shit that's straight up, like, abhorrent that occurs on a daily basis everywhere. So if you're going to go to a place, you're going to be stuck in a place, it doesn't matter where it is. You can talk fucking London, Paris,
right?
The Congo, whatever. It doesn't matter. Wherever you are, there's going to be shit that's going on that's chill, not chill, and then really fucked up. Always.
Right.
So part of being in a place for any extended period of time is understanding where you are.
Right.
And if that means that sometimes guys get enveloped in a situation and guys are in a place where there's zero contact with our employer or zero oversight for ethical behavior or whatever the case, you get things like less than desirable behavior in combat situations. You get things like drug use that's very readily available and like, shit like that. Like
right.
when you're in Colombia and somebody comes up to you and they give you like the most pure fucking outrageously insanely amazing cocaine of all time and they say it's $3 a gram and then you got like 15 Shakiras following you back to do it with you because they want the green card. Like, at a certain point obviously something's going to happen with someone.
Right.
You can't just
right.
You can't leave these innovative thinking shooters out there on their own with no oversight and surrounded in an environment that is like pushing the limits of like social acceptability the way that they push the limits of professional acceptability and the way it's designed in our non-standard asymmetric approach to things.
Yeah.
You can't put those guys out there and expect everybody's going to be like a Boy Scout and follow the rules. Our careers are designed around not following rules.
Right.
So,
yeah, you're breaking every rule when you land.
The whole from day one to the end, they teach us how to not follow the rules.
Right.
Well, you're gonna put a bunch of kids that you taught that with no guidance, with no like effective personal life leadership, role models, or like anybody taking responsibility for that outside of their work role, and you're gonna put these kids out there in that situation, and then expose them to these potentially like life altering awesome stuff, and then be like, nah, don't bang that chick that looks like Shakira or any of her 10 friends that look like Shakira, even though they want to bang you and you look like a fucking mongoloid. Don't do it.
Right. You can't cross that line, kid.
No, don't do it. Nobody will ever know but don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
So during downtimes and stuff, then the guys let off steam and they'll have fun, and then they'll because they're used to breaking rules.
I don't want to chalk it up to they're used to breaking rules. I mean, that's like a fucking cop out almost. I want to say that they're good at breaking rules because that's what they're good at.
Right.
Like we're specifically designed that way almost.
Yeah. So your personal experience during your military career, because you had a pretty illustrious military career, you had tons of certifications and a lot of meaningful deployments and things like that.
I don't think anything was super meaningful. I think the way I went about it was the most meaningful part.
Okay.
So like I was always breaking rules.
Yeah. Including some downtime.
No drug tests, fucking whatever, anything. Like I failed 2 drug tests and still got an honorable discharge, which I don't know if that fucks anybody over, but it doesn't matter at this point. You can't do anything. Like hey, that's fucked.
Right.
It's a zero tolerance policy.
Right.
There have been guys that are at a bar when somebody else got in a fight.
Right.
And they weren't even drinking, and they got ARI, got their like job pulled.
Right.
I failed 2 fucking drug tests.
Right.
What?
Yeah. So you've experienced while you're in the military, you experienced some weed and some other things.
Oh, so I did all the drugs I could.
You did all the drugs.
Everything. Everything I could try. And I don't want to like chalk it up to learning because like a lot of it. So I tried everything once because why wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to experiment.
Why? I mean, even not just living like.
Right.
Why wouldn't you try everything once just to understand? All right, so if you're gaining perspective, which is the ultimate goal in life, I think, then try everything once, most things twice, because a single exposure doesn't warrant fucking knowledge. So,
so what's the kind of stuff you were doing?
So I tried. I definitely did. I smoked weed. I drank, smoked. Had a good amount of exposure at MDMA. That was a lot of fun. We'll say like downtime, like festivals and stuff. We got to fuck around and find, And I'm really good at sniffing out street pharmacists, so it was always pretty easy. Then let's see,
cocaine.
A lot of acid, a lot of cocaine. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Dude, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't done a whole lot of
I know
exogenous drugs.
Oh, I'm very well aware. I took you, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the stuff that stuff like ketamine, pretty much everything. I had some exposure to 2CI, all the 2Cs, the synthetic serotonergic psychedelics, let's see, the MDA, it's a good derivative. I've had pretty much fucking everything. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to find out. I'm scouring my memory and trying to figure out if there's anything I didn't do.
So you obviously did psilocybin and mushrooms and
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't have heroin, but I had Dilaudid so many fucking times, and that shit's like 35 times more potent than the best heroin. So I don't really see the point in heroin. It's fucking asinine. But so pretty much everything. And at first it was experiential, so I just wanted to understand just some magnitude. So I'm not talking about like crazy doses or wild shit.
Just trying,
dabbling to see, to understand, and on the quest to understand not just my body but my mind, and get a notion of temporal place, and all that stuff helps. And then the other stuff that I did that I continued doing was because it was fucking awesome and fun, and why not?
Right.
Especially the stuff that wasn't unsafe.
Right. Yeah. So the more tame versions of things and whatnot.
The stuff that maybe has a stigma, but it has a stigma the same way like synthetic and pro hormones have, because it's misunderstood and it's illegal to study, and et cetera. It's
right, controlled substances.
Beating a dead horse at this point, like because the government like 40, 50, 60 years ago thought it was bad. Right. Does not mean it is a unhealthy, unsafe, or anything of the sort.
Right. And that's, science is bearing that out, right? Because now we have,
it's almost absurd how inarguable the science is, like one-sided.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny that, the MAPS folks are now in phase 3 trials of like MDMA and psilocybin and things for treating PTSD and for returning veterans, ironically. and they're finding nothing but positive results, and they're finding results that are like mind-blowingly effective on like MDMA is 72%
like
effective,
incomprehensibly effective.
yeah.
And you know what's funny about that? And you know, people can say what they want about correlation and cause and effect. I got my own opinions on that. But if you look at the trend in drug abuse and these veterans coming back from, you know, whatever theaters, you're looking at abusing things like alcohol, which is more of a social thing. It just happens to be an issue when you notice that somebody did something fucked up,
Right.
and then all of a sudden it's a problem. But the reality is by the Navy standards, I don't think I know more than 3 guys in the SEAL teams that weren't alcoholics by the Navy standards.
Right.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Right.
Then one guy gets in trouble one night, and then all of a sudden, fucking alcohol problem.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little ridiculous,
So. Yeah.
little hypocritical, I think, maybe of the military to say, oh, now because we made a headline, we need to take control.
Now
of
we got a
this.
shit down your throat. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
now you're the one that's fucked up, and you've always been fucked up. What's your problem? Yeah. No. But if you look at the trends outside of the alcohol, what's really funny is you see these guys getting popping on drug tests for things like MDMA,
Right.
cocaine,
Yeah.
marijuana.
Right.
So
Like
you're
it's
looking at
like it's the first time they've ever done it.
First of all, you act like this is like somebody slapped mom at a dinner table. Like, this is not news. Like, everybody does this shit in the world. Like, maybe grow up and approach it with a little more tact. But anyway, that's an opinion. That's totally subjective. I'm talking from an objective standpoint right now in current treatment for the most prevalent issues with those people. Well, you're talking about TBI, you're talking about PTSD, and you're talking about pain, peripheral neuropathy, and pain residuals, which are being treated by marijuana,
Right.
MDMA,
Right.
and for TBI, they fucking prescribe Adderall. It's a chemical fucking equivalent in your body of goddamn cocaine. It's like,
Right.
you're talking about these guys coming back and getting medication that you guys are trying to justify giving people because it's so profoundly effective.
Right.
What the fuck is the problem?
Right. Yeah, it's a little ridiculous.
You guys are looking at the fucking Bible and writing goddamn current law.
Right.
Like, the equivalent. Like, come on. Like,
Right,
maybe look at the fundamental flaws, like the systemic issues.
After you get your drinky drink on.
Yeah, and for all you viewers out there, I'm still not an alcoholic. And I'm still making a drink.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. In all of your drug experiences, you never really seem to have the target or the mindset of expanding consciousness. Would that be fair to say?
No, I think that was the original point.
Okay.
The experimenting with things that altered my state of mind and my perception of the world around me so that I'd understand why the perception of the world around me is the way it is sober.
Okay, so that's not fair to say. So you started your consciousness journey with these exogenous compounds, with these external drugs that you put into your system to say
specifically to alter and obtain perspective outside of that, like to expand my mind and understand what the world around me is capable of telling me outside of my sober, very, very narrow and like linear thought.
Okay. And then we took a trip just recently down to the jungles of Peru.
Oh yeah.
To hang out with some shaman, and we experienced for the first time for me, and for you, ayahuasca, which is a NN-DMT active tea, right? Which is a very high potent psychedelic, but it's a sacred drink for them, right? It's a sacred, like there are thousands of years of history where these shamans over generations pass down the information from one generation to the next on, out of 10,000 species of plant in the Amazon, the 2 exact plants that needed to be boiled together as an active, you have this leaf that then extracts the N,N-dimethyltryptamine from the leaf, but then you also have this...
The ayahuasca vine is the DMT, and the chacruna leaves is the MAO.
Right. And so then that, when you take it orally, it doesn't your
Don't metabolize.
Yeah, your stomach breaks it down immediately. But then with the vine juice boiled into the tea, that inhibits that whole process, and so it makes the DMT active. And so it's a whole new level of experience over the other stuff that you had experienced before. Would you say that's fair?
Right. Yeah. So, I saw the value in the altered states that accompany the serotonergic psychedelic family. Like, those the specific entheogens that give you some really, really really widened aperture.
Right.
I guess would be the best way to put it.
Right.
Like, give your mind a much wider aperture. And so I looked into that, researched it, pretty decent at self-education at this point, I guess, at least for me. Obviously. Of course I think so. But yeah, so I looked into it, saw a lot of stuff, a lot of subjective analysis, a lot of horror stories, a lot of like overglorification and unnecessary, like, grandiose, and then I saw a very, very, very minuscule amount of tangible, quantifiable, and objective research and data, and that was enough for me. But I'm also pretty risque. I'm not really hyper concerned with the negative consequences of most things.
Right.
It's whatever,
Right.
That's how you learn. So I got enough for me to chew on for a minute and decide that I was gonna try a couple of different things. First, I was gonna exercise my capability of experiencing whatever people call a hero dose. Just funny now, knowing what we know now about the shrooms,
Right.
Turns out a hero dose is 5 grams of shrooms.
Right.
Not 15. But whatever.
So you
obviously didn't do enough research or enough shrooms, one or the other. But so I get, I went down the rabbit hole on hero doses. My behavior's always kind of been unapologetic anyway, but I think that's just a weird contextual way of saying I've already made peace with what's going to happen, what I'm going to engage in, and I don't have a whole lot of shit to rehash, or shit doesn't like resurface that's being repressed. There's not a whole lot of turmoil that's unaddressed, and I'm very, very comfortable with the way my mind works and what kind of things are gonna become very illuminated at what depth. So knowing that, after going into these hero doses, I was like, all right, cool, whatever, get the experience, take away whatever I can from the physical experience. I wasn't super introspective. I mean, I was introspective more so than I would say probably a large percentage of the population that I was surrounded by, for sure. Just in life in general, but not in relation to the way I see things going now and the way I am now.
Right.
So, but I was introspective to a degree enough that I understood the value and what it meant to me. So, so that's why I didn't let the military's bullshit, antiquated philosophy and paradigm get in the way of me gaining perspective, regardless of the outcome.
Right.
So I went down that, and then I decided to microdose because I saw the potential value in that. So I microdosed shrooms and acid before on separate occasions and for pretty lengthy periods of time, like 6 years total.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, you understand, like it's a game changer.
Yeah.
It really is. It restructures the way your brain operates from the fucking very basis of operation, just sending signals. It just restructures everything.
Right.
And it restructures it in a very, very, very healthy way.
Right.
To the point where your brain actually recreates new brain tissue to substantiate and support it. Like it's...
Yeah, and that's a big thing for you because you came out of the military, like as a lot of special operators do, with traumatic brain injury, right?
Right. So the nature of the job and its service-wide, like not just in the Navy, not in the SEAL teams, not whatever, it's all of the special units that are involved with things like explosives or concussive force, or whatever the case. Yeah, like even the guys that just got through like just buds and like third phase or whatever.
Right.
They got explosive concussive force exposure that warrants like some degree of follow-up that's a little more thorough than what just about anybody gets anyway. So you know, you can close your eyes and throw a dart and hit somebody in the SEAL teams and they have TBI to, you know, to some degree, whether manageable or not, or whether they realize it or not.
Right.
You know, and so when you're talking about these parts of the brain that have decided to turn into this white matter, like the ICE result of the traumatic brain injury, which you see a lot in NFL players now and stuff. These guys are just noticing it in the NFL, and those guys bang heads all day, every day, with literal physical specimens. Like, that shit hurts.
Right.
I wasn't good enough to stay with that, but
right.
You can get blown up all fucking day, come bleeding out of the ears, and everybody's like, yeah, go sit down and drink a fucking can of tea. You like come back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Right. And then you're a pussy if you don't. So you do.
Yeah.
And then when everybody don't think so good, everybody's asking questions. But you know, but the brain's magnificent. So when you start shutting off these the blood flow to these parts of the brain that are what I like to refer to it as the lazy brain.
Right.
The way your very abstinent brain
right
likes to act when there's work involved.
Right.
It's like, oh, I got to do one thing. Give me half a thing to do. I got to do half a thing. Give me a quarter of a thing to do. Yeah. So eventually, you just start following these fucking already cut trails, and your brain's just like what they call it, the default mode network. So it's things that your brain does that you may not even realize. Like, so you ever been driving home and like kind of space out a little bit, and then you realize that you got all the way home through multiple traffic lights in traffic. Like,
right. Yeah.
And don't remember.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
You shouldn't be on autopilot like that. That's not safe.
Right. Yeah, and the default mode network, by the way, Ed wrote about this a lot in the Mind Hacking Habitus books. That is correlated with depression. It's correlated with 20% less happiness.
It's lazy. It doesn't correct.
Right.
It just acts. It acts independent of circumstance. So like you would just be driving.
Right.
Like the only way you would know that you like spaced out is if you got in a wreck until you get home and you're not in a wreck.
Right.
And then you're like, holy fuck.
Right.
So of course depression goes unnoticed.
Right.
Because you're not dying.
Right. Yeah, and
you're just dead inside.
Right. There's nothing that the nervous system is reporting on. Yeah. No differences.
No, the limbic system doesn't feel like there's a challenge to the physical like homeostasis. There's no status quo challenge. It's just whatever your fucking brain has to deal with as a symptom of being biologically alive.
Right.
Which at that point it doesn't matter to any rest of you. So if you're shut off like autopilot, fucking googly eyed and just going on, that's basically the way most people live life.
Yeah. And so the microdosing for you was a game changer, was it?
Yeah, I mean it certainly was. I'm not going to take away from that. The microdosing was definitely a very, very eye-opening experience. But that was I don't even want to say tip of the iceberg. That's like, I mean, it doesn't even warrant comparison. That was barely touching the surface before even scratching it,
Okay.
So you're talking about microdosing and in an environment that requires abstract problem solving, which became supremely easier across the board just because of the functionality of the brain when the default mode network is cut off from blood supply.
Right.
Like, you don't have to be high to experience that. You don't have to be seeing your walls breathing or fucking, little pink Christina Aguilera monsters fucking crawling up your body. Like, that's not a requirement for the brain to function in a non-standard manner. So after a certain point, you realize that life's just kind of easier. And I don't know if it's because of that or because of just attitude and perspective change, or it's because of introspection along the line or whatever. Or, some goofy concoction of all of the above, whatever. You end up finding out you're just happy.
Right.
Yeah. You're just happy because life's just easier.
Right.
No matter how hard it looks or how hard it seems, it's just easier.
Yeah. Notice how was all of your previous drug experiences, how did they compare to your first experience with ayahuasca or the first experiences you had with ayahuasca?
Man, I wish there was a way to explain that. Like, honestly, like, for anybody that's ever done things like acid or shrooms or taken hero doses, anybody that's had MDA or 2CI, 2C, whatever, any of the 2Cs, like any Molly, anything like that, they'll probably understand this a lot more than others, but there aren't words to describe the experience, and it's almost inappropriate to try and compare. But if you think about, like, you think about a hero dose being an almost overwhelming and unmanageable level of intoxication or psychosomatic response or whatever you want to call it from a legal or moral standpoint,
Right.
then you're talking about a chemical or an entheogen or a portal or whatever that takes the most potent, the most meaningful, the most I don't know, the most of all of each one of all of those,
Mm-hmm.
and multiplying it by a factor that doesn't exist.
Wow.
You know, like you know, you want to say like to the nth degree, but that gives you like a logarithmic equation. You can put that on a graph, and at some point you can draw, you can extrapolate and draw conclusions.
Right.
There is no, like, as much experiences I've had, and as much of the serotonergic, psychedelic, physiological experiences I knew what to expect, and as much of the mindfulness as I've like come to accumulate and put into effective practice over, pushing almost 2 decades now. You're talking about something that takes you out of your own fucking shoes.
Right.
Like, all right, never mind. All that shit that I was looking at this experience from my perspective, I'm not me.
Right. Right. So all of the previous experiences were you with some kind of consciousness alteration or some kind of
right in
some
reference
kind of
to who
filter,
I am.
Right. Some kind of filter over the top of whatever it is that you're perceiving.
The ego's, your false perception of self, your surface self, or whatever. What do you guys call it?
Yeah.
The
self map or the ego self.
It's like the superficial self, like the whatever.
Yeah, the false self.
The false self. So this is like this thing that exists that you're sure you are until like it gets challenged, and then you restructure it like on the fly. And it's kind of like this bastardized, like a little bit adulterated version of what your brain wanted to think it was or what it wanted to be, and then just so it could assess danger. And then now you're like, in his world where everything you've done before is being referenced from that perspective, and now you're looking at this experience that's, this much more potent, this much more magnified, and this much more intense, and this much more meaningful, and this much more but no frame of reference. Meaningful to what?
Right. So
in comparison to what? You don't have you.
Would you say it redefines your sense of self? Period.
Well, that's the thing is it functionally doesn't allow you to operationally define self.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big again, that's a big pill to swallow. When you're spending your entire life trying to understand who you are and gain notion of temporal place, the one thing that seems so counterproductive but has so much potential for value is operationally not being able to define self.
Right.
You want to figure out who you are, figure out exactly what it takes to not be able to define it.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good way to put it.
It's like I was talking to my ex-wife's brother today. He said it was put to him a pretty cool way because he's a web developer. He's like, it's like somebody hit Control-Alt-Delete and just fucking wiped everything, and you're left with a computer that just has one folder on the desktop and it's like my old shit, because you still remember the way things were.
Right.
It's just like one folder that says old shit.
Yeah.
And he was like, it's kind of like that, right? And I said, well, it's kind of like that, except once you've experienced a true, in quotes, ego death, because a lot of people define ego a different way than we do.
Right.
But once you experience that death, that ego death of false self or whatever, the neurons or the neurological connections that just get fried out.
Right.
You're talking about not just wiping the computer, like reformatting or whatever, factory reset. You're talking about also destroying the code for the program that installs things.
Yeah, you're changing
You're changing operating systems.
Yeah.
You're fundamentally changing the way that computer operates too.
Right.
So now, not only do you have just one folder that says, well, bullshit, but every time you want to install something new, now you have a new installment program that doesn't necessarily follow the same rules as the old one. You don't just click the install wizard and then like, yep, set up, all right, go, in. Like now, you're the one writing the fucking guidelines for what goes in and what goes out, and you're not doing it from a state of mind where you're like, oh, this is what I want, this is what Ben wants,
right?
Or not even like this is what the old Ben would have wanted. Now you're looking at it like, well, fuck, why would I do that? Why would anyone?
Right.
And if anyone would ever, why should I?
Right.
So it really takes the notion of self out of a lot of the shit, which is nice. It's a healthy reset, and it's not sustainable. You can't actually have ego death because ego and things like ego and fear exist to drive biological function. So if we're going to be alive, those are pivotal. They're requirements to drive biological function.
Yeah, and I try to explain that to a lot of people, especially in the mind hacking happiness books, that I'm like, look, you can diminish ego, you can diminish the effect that it has on your life, but you can never get rid of it because it's a biological function.
It has to exist because otherwise, why would you just stay alive? Why, if once you've experienced the ego death, that means that to some degree you've connected with the infinite, you've connected with that like level of consciousness that exists outside of this perceivable world, and you understand that regardless of what happens here, you go into something that's so indescribably awesome that, like, legitimately, if there was no ego and there was no fear, why the fuck would you stay alive?
Right.
Like, you'd start a pistol as soon as you came out of that state and go right back to it. I'd argue with myself in that realm all the time. Like, why the fuck do I have to go back?
Right.
Until I realized, like, things like we were discussing, and we'll talk about later in other stuff, but like, at a certain point, you realize that you don't actually experience ego death. You experience ego discipline, where you treat ego like you would treat a small child with compassion, but you wouldn't let them drive your car.
Right.
They have to become subservient but exist.
Right.
You can't kill a kid.
Right.
But you're not going to let them drive you home.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's got to be a subservient entity that exists within. So your biological function can still functionally operate and drive and stay existing. And fear is the same way. Fear is like, we talk about fear is a green light. Like, we lean into fear.
Yeah.
But that's because we've operationally redefined what fear means to our bodies, because there is no fear of the unknown. There's no fear of what's after. There's no fear of what could be. The fear is an indicator that something may or may not require action, and how bright that light is blinking requires how soon or immediate that action must be taken.
Right.
But that's it.
Right.
From that point, it's up to us to decide not only what action, but what that action is going to implicate for us, like what it's going to mean, whether or not it's worth taking.
Right.
It's like a little bubble on your text message. Like, if you know you're expecting a text from an asshole and you see that little fucking one thing pop up, as compelled as you are to get rid of that little bubble and the edge of your text message thing, you're like, I know that faggot sent me a text because he's fucking dicking with me. I'm not going to answer that. And you put it away. But if you're waiting for a text from your fucking, for something important, what do people think are important these days? Like a fucking sweepstakes or something. I don't know.
Right.
Publishers Clearinghouse. You wait for the fucking text saying you want. You're going to fucking hit every goddamn text.
Right.
And look at it. So
right.
we get to decide now what's important instead of that default mode network.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this question, because a lot of the backstory of how we came together is connected with this book that I wrote, Mind Hacking Happiness, right?
Yeah, fucking awesome book.
Your integration of the stuff that you read in that book and the ability to integrate it and take command of it and become a master of it occurred the fastest of anyone that I've ever had someone read the book, right? But when you read that,
so the book was awesome, and it had a completely different impact for me than it probably did for most people. But this is coming from a perspective, and I think we talked in pretty great detail the first time we met, and we fucking sat down and had drinks and just like got to know each other a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know what you had heard about, like, where I was or where I was coming from or like where I was at, like, emotionally or whatever, but I'm sure I'm certain, based on just your reaction in our interactions since then, that nobody told you what to expect as far as like the way I think.
Yeah.
But that's because nobody that you knew in my life understood the way I think anyway.
No.
And that's why.
Right.
Like they saw something they didn't understand and they were afraid or they were saddened or whatever the case. Like, so they probably didn't give you a very fair representation of what to expect. And it's something that I've been actively pursuing from a again, self-educated perspective for a long time, and trying to propagate throughout that former community, the SEAL teams, my personal life. Talk to my ex-wife's brother about it all the time. You just get people to manage their perspective, because if you can manage the physiological responses, you can manage the way you assess your environment, then you really have effectively managed your own reality at that point. And the book goes into such vivid detail, and it's so easy to absorb that it's way more appropriate for that to be read than just to boil it down to that simplistic view. But that's what it is. You manage your physical response and you manage your perspective analysis, and then you're done.
Right.
That's it. Then you're happy.
Right.
Because you're the one managing it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because at the point that you're watching your mind, right, then all of a sudden your mind doesn't have control anymore. You have control of your mind versus your mind having you in control. Or how I put it in the book, instead of your mind having its leash on you, you have the leash around your mind.
Right. You're not like, so if your mind's a factory and it's got this product that it's putting out, you're not the person at the end of the fucking conveyor belt seeing the product that your brain is putting out.
Right.
And then reacting to it.
Right.
Even if you're the first person to.
Right.
You're the one that's doing quality control.
Right.
And managing what the fuck is putting out.
Yeah, and what's going down the conveyor belt.
Right.
Yeah.
Whoever's at the end of the conveyor belt doesn't fucking matter. Ego, fear, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Because the dude controlling the quality control is the one is really, really in charge. So and then, anybody that's spent any respectable amount of time being introspective will tell you, and all the big, major, respectable religious leaders have all said the same shit. If you ever want to understand someone else, the very first step is to understand yourself. And that is impossible to achieve finitely.
Yes.
It's not something that is an end state. It is something that is certainly the epitome of, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Yes.
So it requires a very, very concerted effort and a thorough, regular, regimented, and aggressive approach to understanding yourself. And if you stop that at any point, or you haven't started, or if you even think that you're not doing enough,
right,
then you're not in a position to assess the state of mind of another. It's inappropriate.
Yeah.
That is like the closest thing to unethical that I can imagine, because I don't really buy into the right or wrong, good, bad, whatever. Like, that's the closest thing to unethical I can imagine, is assuming to understand another state of mind with a very, very, very strong understanding that you don't know yourself.
Right.
So introspection was the first step.
Yeah. You've got to have that. I mean, to know yourself, you need to be able to look at yourself, right? And to be able to look at yourself, you need to have that insight to be able to step away from what your mind is doing, to be able to see the whole process of all of your emotional processing and what your mind is creating via your emotions, your entire self existence, your sense of self, your perceptions as they're coming in, and see the whole fucking thing working soup to nuts as it works.
Exactly.
And then, and only then, you will understand yourself, and then be able to understand other people. Just like Jung said, Jung was one of the first people to say, if you want to understand the darknesses of others, you need to understand the darkness within yourself.
Right, you got to know your shadow self.
Yeah.
But that's part of the understanding that is looking at this, taking a step out of being a participant, or like in the first person shooter game, you're taking a step out of the first person shooter into the third person shooter.
Yeah.
And you're watching what your self is doing.
Right.
But you have to do it from a stance where it doesn't matter trying to rationalize why.
Right.
You have to just witness.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, if you try to rationalize it, that means that you're tethered to what you just detached from.
So let me ask you this question. Did that help you throughout your ayahuasca experiences in the jungles of Peru?
I don't know if anybody needs help.
You think it just happens naturally?
No, I think I don't think the way I think happens naturally.
Yeah.
I think ayahuasca happens naturally.
Okay.
But I don't think you need help through it. I think you get exactly what you need. If you can't muster the fortitude to be introspective, then you're gonna feel the fucking pain getting there.
Yeah, because I mean, really, what it is, my assessment or my opinion of what it is a chemical compound that allows your waking awareness to talk to a level of your own subconscious.
It's a portal
that you're not usually communicating with.
Yeah,
right?
You don't have an open dialogue with the parts of your you.
Right.
That are very, very active and present in that new board meeting.
Yeah. So now, how much of a consciousness expansion experience did you find that personally, that experience?
It was a validating experience. It wasn't illuminating as much as validating.
Okay. Explain.
So I've always, you can ask anybody that was pretty close with me, throughout as long as I can remember having a social life. I've always told everybody, if somebody's upset about something, like, yeah, it sounds like a personal problem.
Right.
And then if I've ever done anything that somebody thinks is fucked up, I'm like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Right.
Kind of.
Right.
Not really.
Yeah.
Do you feel better that I said sorry?
Like, your personal reactions
that's
to
unfortunate.
Things is, you're creating your own strife.
Don't say that. You upset. Like, that's unfortunate.
Right.
But they're like, you put yourself in a position like you didn't give yourself the opportunities. First of all, I don't need anybody else to tell me how to give myself opportunities. Right. I've obtained and squandered plenty of opportunities 10 times over the amount of most people have ever had. And I'm very well aware of that. I'm aware of the brilliant opportunities I've squandered. I'm aware of the brilliant opportunities I've obtained. I'm aware of my current place. I don't care what I could have done if I, sucked the sociological dick off of something to just climb a ladder. I don't care.
Right.
The reason I act like this is because I fundamentally do not care.
Right.
So I don't need to be explained to that I seem like I don't care. I'm very well aware I don't care. So stop telling me things that I already know. And but I've always been that way. And so when I do things, it comes off as callous or unapologetic or sociopathic, or whatever kind of fucking label you want to throw on it. We're not going to give the DSM-4 any fucking validity, but
right,
whatever. So that sounds all well and good if you're a fucking conformist, but no. But the reality is I don't have shit to rehash.
Right.
So my perspective was not one that was requiring. I wanted perspective expansion. I wanted perspective enhancement. I wanted this, that, and the other. All I got was validation that the way I exist, and because I am happy and currently not seeking answers to questions that don't have answers, or correcting things that I don't feel need correcting, or conforming to ideological standards that I don't necessarily fundamentally agree with on a personal level or internal level. Not trying to design some intrinsic value around something that either does or doesn't exist. Because of all these things, there doesn't need to be a fundamental or a paradigm or systemic or whatever shift in the way I think.
Right.
So what I got from ayahuasca was see what happened. Like when I was in the experience and I try to control or try to whatever, try to stay mindful or anything like that, and it drug me through the fucking dirt for quick instances until I was like, oh yeah, you're right. What I got was chill out. Everything's good. You already got it. Just don't dilute this perspective with a false notion of the need to for further achievement. There is no achievement. It's the journey.
Right.
The self-reflection journey.
So you got a validation that I'm not really, how I look at the world naturally, I'm not really broken. And oh, by the way, I didn't go far enough, maybe.
It doesn't need a correction. If anything, it needs to maintain steady course, because the way I approach introspection does not have a finite end.
Right.
It does not have depth parameters.
Right.
It is only solely responsible for eliciting concerted effort and thorough due diligence. So there's no, at least from in my opinion, there is no deviation from that course.
Right.
It doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
Like those few standards for introspection, they outline your existence as a biological creature.
Right.
So from that point, everything else is, peanuts to an elephant. You just take what you got when you got it. There, bits and pieces of a whole. You're getting pixels of a picture until you have one, and then when you have the picture, it's probably over.
Right.
So
yeah. Wow.
Collecting pixels.
That's cool.
And it's cool because you go through life and you get little nuggets of gold, and you get these pixels, and through really profoundly life-changing experiences, whether on psychedelics or through circumstance or through introspection, or whatever the case. And then you get these one pixel here and there. Ayahuasca is really good at giving you like 1080 view out of the gate.
Right. Now, did it sort of expanded your understanding? Now, a lot of people have this unitive type experience coming out of this. Did you have that type of, one with everything type of?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you couldn't.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the purpose of these serotonergic psychedelics, these entheogens, are specifically to take somebody whose mind is abstaining, or somebody who is like therapy resistant or maladaptive in the frame of introspection and spiritual growth. I think these things exist specifically to bully their maladaptive or dysfunctional parts of their brain that they don't want in the way into this realm without consent.
Right.
I legitimately can't think of a scenario where you would experience this and not feel that way, no matter how much trauma you rehashed or whatever. Because everything you rehash, all the negativity, whatever the case, everybody's experience had like negativity rehashed, whatever the case, they came out of it saying it's the goddamn best thing in the world. Right. And it's because of that surge of serotonin, like it makes your body address and reassess these negative, repressed, traumatic, whatever, compartmentalized experiences, but from a place where you physically and physiologically can only experience unconditional love and compassion physically.
Right.
So you have to reallocate a positive ideology to it.
Yeah. So you basically kind of rewrite how your brain was working and how your sense of self was formulated.
From the prospect of unconditional love.
Right.
What better way?
Yeah. So that experience, you think, pumped up your compassion a little bit?
My compassion exists in its own world, and it doesn't necessarily look like compassion to most, but I have a big heart. I just have I guess in the spiritual world, this is where I'm going to differ from a lot of people. I don't think empathy has a place in a current human evolution. I think sympathy is a great thing. I think being compassionate, like you said, is a very effective thing. I think love is going to literally be the cure to all of human pathology to some degree. Hopefully in the near future. But
because one of the things that I think is going to blow a lot of people's mind that I know about you that they may not know about you, but they're going to know about here in just a few seconds, is that you're kind of coming from the position of being an elite warrior, one of the best trained soldiers in the world, and very effective at what you did in the military. You're kind of on I hope we're getting to world peace someday.
Yeah, I mean, like that's it. It's a disgusting idea. Like literally, like got goosebumps thinking about the idea that anybody wants to cause harm.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that comes from like what we talked about, the duality perspective.
Right.
Where you think it's you and then there's others.
Right.
And fair enough. I don't expect everybody to think that they're one with all, or whatever that case. But
right, because the reality
but
is
violence begets violence. It's a virus, and you don't get rid of viruses by spreading them to others.
Right. That's true. And
fact.
And everybody knows that I'm definitely on the world peace train. But what they probably don't understand is that I also understand that we live in a very realistic world, and there's
Right.
a greater good question of, do you allow the person, like if you have the means to stop a school shooter or whatever it is, do you allow, because you're the peacenik, do you allow that person to go shoot another 30 kids when you have the ability where you are to maybe get the jump on the guy and take the gun away, or maybe hit him with a baseball bat that's there with the baseball team, and you potentially kill him? Like, you're the peacenik that says, I'm never going to kill anybody.
Fair.
There's a greater good need, at which point you're drawing a line in the sand that gets really fuzzy at the point that you're talking about terrorists wanting to come kill thousands and potentially hundreds of thousands of people. That does not serve the greater good.
And you're still talking about it even from a polarized perspective. Yeah, something that is very important to understand before I even go into that whole world is I don't necessarily buy into the good or bad. It's a polarized perspective on an omnidirectional personality or character. The omnidirectional human condition is it's not appropriate to polarize it.
Right.
There is no good and bad.
Right.
But like one man's good is another man's bad is another man's like acceptable, whatever.
Yeah.
The point is not only is it circumstantial, but circumstances change, time changes, humans change, cultures change, like everything changes. So good and bad, the idea that there is a universal standard for good and bad is fucking retarded.
Right.
It really is.
Right.
It's fucking asinine. And it doesn't matter how you want to say it. Like you could say, like rape is operationally and fundamentally universally terrible. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I disagree with that. I don't think people should be raped. What I'm saying is you're not the one that decides a universal standard for good and bad. You'd have to be infallible.
Right.
And nobody is.
Right.
So there cannot, literally, from a fucking scientific mathematical standpoint, if there is not a single infallible entity,
right,
there is no such thing as a universal standard. So I think it's important for people to unadopt this whole polarized perspective of good and bad. Now, in your example of if there's a fucking terror, whatever, school shooter and stuff, and you're the pacifist, like I'm not going to hurt anybody, that's fine.
Right.
Don't.
Right.
Watch people die. Fair.
Yeah.
Nobody's asking you to hurt anybody.
True.
I don't want to hurt people either. Like nobody wants to hurt anybody.
Right. You have the freedom not to, but I think here.
Yeah. Are you cool with living with that? You cool with watching it?
Right. Because here's the other side of that. Because to live in a non-dual existence, where you are, you're just another version of me sitting on the sofa, and I'm another version of you doing the interview over here in this chair, and that we're all the same people, and then that person over there shooting these kids is just another version of me who has lost his way, and I'm not the person who needs to judge that or take action against that.
No, they're in pain and they're doing something that they're fundamentally like tied to.
Right.
Like,
but at the same time, then we can live in that non-dual existence, but the reality is we live in this dualistic body that does create these separations, these lines of demarcation where we can't access universal consciousness at all times, right?
Right.
We cannot. So we're in this body that, from design, I mean, we have multiple levels of demarcation in our own mind that don't allow our waking consciousness to talk to multiple levels of our subconsciousness, because if we had all the fucking control panels to beating our heart and running the immune system...
We'd be on ayahuasca all the time.
Right, we would be... Right, well, we would certainly be overwhelmed.
I would.
And wouldn't be able to run our bodies, and we would probably die versus the overload. So we have to play the cards that we're dealt. We have to be this human being inside this meat suit,
right,
and make those judgmental decisions based on what's going on.
But you're making them based on what's going on to you.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I'm saying is when you think you're so right that it requires action, then when you start talking about the world that when that action may or may not involve a lethal force encounter, how fucking right are you?
Right.
How much do you want right and wrong to exist?
Right.
You want to be so right that you watch people die?
Right.
Do you want to do something so wrong in your mind that you save people? Like that creates a lot of avenues to draw different lines as excuses. And so if you think about it to the degree where I'm not interested in hurting people. I'm not interested in passing an infallible judgment on whether or not what they're doing is right or wrong. Certainly not interested in engaging someone in a lethal force encounter. So at the impasse where somebody is actively engaged in something like that, especially in your proximal rage or somewhere where you're nearly obligated. First of all, you got to realize that it's your obligation in your own mind. So it's the perceived construct, probably a false construct. You're not obligated to do anything. You're not.
Right.
It's nice if you do.
Right.
To other people, but it's nice to them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Another subjective
Right.
measurement.
Subjective measurement against a subjective measurement against a dually subjective measurement. Right. Cool. So already absurdly invalid from an objective standpoint. Now you're talking about, is it, how do you negotiate this impasse? Like, obstacles have solutions, whether they're non-standard or abstract or whatever. There's a problem. If there's a problem, there's a solution.
Right.
So you get to a point where you realize that if violence is what you're opposed to because of the ramifications and the horrendous adverse effects that it has on the human condition, not just in a singular society, not just in a segregated or isolated culture, but worldwide. You're talking about, I hate violence so much that the only way to stifle it is to become better at it than anybody else that exists, so you can remain unchallenged and then actively abstain from resorting to it.
Right.
You have to be the best at violence and choose not to use it, so that the top of the pyramid is still peace. Not the guy that's the biggest bully at a time. And he's not standing on the shoulders of everybody afraid to act or compelled by right and wrong, or in a dualist perspective, challenging their own fundamental values against societal, expected, or, the sheriff that's supposed to be taking care of the kids at the school, but he can't go in because he doesn't know what a shooter is. He don't want to die. This, that, and the other. And then everybody hates him because he didn't act, and that's his job to be there. And then it's just so much bullshit. It's so convoluted that and none of it's valid.
Right.
Best bet, be so good at violence that nobody can do it in your presence, and then choose not to use it.
Right.
And then it's over. It's done. So, same thing with like...
So that explains the need for a military.
Right. Especially an overly prepared and overly capable one.
Right.
The reason we're a power when we have no economy and we have no resource, no anything, is because we're so good at being violently capable and so good at abstaining with our absurdly strict rules of engagement. We are, by all means and manners, completely infallible. We're the only superpower that ever has or ever will exist because of it.
And granted that we go off path. I mean, there are some leaders that I think, for to have a 17-year...
We cut the path. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. To have a 17-year engagement in a war that asks so much of the military forces that we have overextended to this point, I think is a little overused. It's a little abusive of the people who are doing the job.
Possibly, but you got to talk to the people doing it, because there's a lot of guys that are staying in for life.
Yeah.
How do you explain that?
Yeah. And
how do you explain operators taking re-enlistments?
Yeah.
How overextended are they? And then not only that, but you're looking at like historical evidence and trends. If our country's got a national deficit and our greatest revenue ever in recorded history has always been during a declared state of war, then why wouldn't we fight a war of sustainment instead of a war that could be won? Not over principle. And then
right.
And then even further, like as long as you're cutting the path, why not continue cutting the path? Like what would we gain by not? Like, yeah, maybe it's an egregious misuse, but maybe we're also not really being that out of line. Maybe it's just the most economically sound alternative to just having everybody here complaining about shit going on here. How about the fact that last year 3 times as many people died in school shootings than they did in combat? How bad is our military being strung out when our kids are going to school and 3 times as many of them died in school than in combat?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all relative.
Yeah, that's a whole different problem that we'll definitely.
That's our problem here.
Yeah, it is.
And you know who doesn't fix that? The military doesn't fix that here.
Right.
So why not have them out there making money? They're obviously all the military members are happy enough. They're staying in to make the money.
Right.
Like who is that hurting?
Right. Well, the people that are on the other end of the gun, I guess.
Well, you'd be surprised at how much we don't engage.
Right.
I mean, everybody looks at it from the media's perspective, but the media is the media.
Yeah.
Like if you saw the amount of paperwork that goes into troops in contact engagement, and the amount of paperwork that is required for, enemy killed in action, stuff like that, after action reports and shit like that, you start to realize, guys are going to jail for war crimes, and they're going to jail because they're killing non-combatants, and they're calling them non-combatants because by the definition of the fucking Geneva Convention, whatever the fuck laws they're following, no matter how many fucking rockets they shot at you or how many fucking IEDs they exploded, as soon as you shot them in the leg and they started crawling away from their weapon, they consider that non-combatant. Even if they're crawling over to another weapon. Like,
yeah.
If this guy's going to jail for war crimes, these guys have been getting shot at by the same asshole for fucking months on end, and they finally tagged him and putting him down to end that repetitive problem.
Yeah.
And then they're going to jail for war crimes? Like, all right, come on. At a certain point, we gotta...
Yeah.
There's some pretty strict rules. I mean, we're not out there just fucking...
Yeah.
Going fucking ham on everybody, like, free of consequence and with zero regard for human life and the well-being of others.
Yeah.
We'd all be in jail.
Yeah, we would.
Everybody in the military.
So let me ask you this question. On our path to world peace, I think there's a multi-pronged approach, obviously, that we need to take in, that we need to be strong, right? To be able to quell the violence by being violent, like you said.
Being capable of violence.
Being capable of violence, but then abstaining. And then, but then also, I mean, there's that whole shifting of the mindset of the defensive self mechanism, right?
Well, that's part of being capable of violence and abstaining. Once you're capable of the ultimate of the offensive, and you actively take a defensive posture, and then you've already postured in the mindset that is required for peace to prevail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like organically, that just happened by nature.
You think that's going to get us there?
I mean,
eventually. Because one of my,
if I had a crystal ball, yeah, that'd be awesome. But how many defensive driving courses are going to teach before people are stop cutting each other off and
yeah,
it's the same concept.
Yeah, because one of the things that I had in my mind is that we can't kill our way to peace, right? Because ultimately,
yeah, right, exactly.
We're talking about
as stupid as that sounds, it's 100% accurate. Like, yeah. I mean, obviously we can't kill our way. No, we can't kill our way to fucking peace. Get it through your heads.
Right, yeah, totally. Because, yeah. I mean, the ego's function in the human body is to create a uniqueness, right?
Right.
And so even if you
to stand out.
Right, yeah, totally. And so if you kill somebody, if you kill the whole group of people who think differently than you,
who are you going to stand out from?
Right, exactly.
It's going to create issues. It's going to create strife.
Yeah, you're going to have a brand new group of people who then want to be different and want to think differently, and it's going to create a brand new enemy.
Fact.
And just like it did in Ireland, right? I mean, you had a group of folks who are, Christians. I mean, we have a problem against, Islam against Christianity and Islam against Judaism and Judaism against Islam and all this, major. But we've had two factions of Christians bombing each other in Ireland until just, I mean, kids growing up nowadays aren't going to remember this, but I remember seeing reports of bombing on the news when I was a kid.
The IRA?
Yeah, the IRA, and so, there were checkpoints and whatnot that you were driving through Ireland, and, it would be like, if you're a Protestant and you're caught in the wrong section of town, you're dead. And if you're Catholic and you're caught in the wrong section of town, you're dead. And you're both Christians, right? There's going to be a point where
it's old news.
Yeah, exactly. Where you try to kill your way out. You're going to kill everybody who thinks differently. And then all of a sudden the ego is going to create a different group to just try to stand out and be unique that's going to need killing. And eventually, you're going to wind up with one fucking person on the planet.
Well, I think that's the value of the U.S. military stance on abstaining from engaging in cultural endeavor.
Okay.
I think that because that's a pillar of ethics and a standard for operating, I think that kind of alleviates our risk of falling into the category of eliminating opposing ideology.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way things are structured, you actually look at it, you don't just listen to the fucking Fox News or CNN or whatever the fuck, you'll start to see that actual combat scenarios and actual combat theater, they ain't platoon on platoon on platoon lined up like a gentleman's fucking war in the Civil War, shooting at each other.
Right.
We're not hunting down people. Like, we're going in small groups. We're training local host nation stable forces to become more stable and be austere.
Right.
And then we aid and assist on operations until they are functionally austere and the job is correctly followed through with. And then we get out.
Yeah.
Whether or not they sustain it is completely up to them.
Yeah.
You give somebody a gift and they throw it in the trash, it's not yours to get upset about anymore. Get over it.
Right.
So,
right.
from a
That's a good way to put it.
From like a conceptual perspective, we're doing as right of a thing as you can consider to be right if you're looking at things from a polarized perspective.
Right. And which we almost have to in this human form, right? We have judgments.
No, we don't have to. That's the problem.
Well, we don't have to, right?
That's the problem. As everybody does. That's
right.
the issue.
Right. The 99.9% of existence that isn't awakened
is requiring violence because it's polarized.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's eliciting it.
It's this or that. It's me or you. It's not this and that.
Yeah,
you.
There's no coexistence because of polarity.
Right.
It's either, well, this is what I think, and that's the way you think. So one of us has got to be right, and one of us got to be wrong.
Right.
No, dude, that's the way I fucking play bar games. Right. That's not life.
Right. Right. Exactly.
I do that shit when I play games because I want to see if there's a winner or loser in the fucking game. That's not such a thing in life. Like, I do that to get away from real life.
Yeah.
I play games with winner or loser. There's no winner and loser in life.
Yeah. You know,
if you think there is, then you're the fucking loser. Out of the gate. Boom. Done.
Right.
You lost.
Right.
Because you're going to die one day trying to figure out how you won something there's no fucking winner or loser to. You already lost.
You know, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by the way you look at things and the way you think about things because of what box they've wanted to put you in, knowing and learning that, you know, you're this elite military operator and that, you know, you're supposed to be this automated killing machine who wins at all costs and thinks of things in
linear thought.
Polarity. Yeah.
And polarity, yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? That's their problem, isn't it? They can sit here and try to swallow that fucking giant horse pill all night long.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to our Two Seals and a Walrus podcast.
Oh, when we go down the fucking rabbit hole on a trip.
Well,
damn.
Yeah, we're gonna have a fun time with, you know, talking about consciousness and talking about our alternate perspectives on the entire world and how we can see things differently and how we don't have to be a victim of our minds and the bullshit that our minds create. and I can't wait, personally, just speaking.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
I can't wait to fucking have you and Doug in a room and we're talking about all this shit from, you know, current events to, you know, our experiences to taking awesome trips and doing awesome consciousness expansion shit. I mean, I think it's going to be amazing and epic.
Yeah, I mean, it's stars aligned for this one. It's going to be gold.
Well, thanks for spending the time with us today here. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
And I had a great time, and I love hanging out with you, and I love your perspective on everything, and it's so fun.
Good, you should. Mine's the best. Matter of fact, I'd wager to say it's the only one that's right. What do you think about that?
There's more God in my head.
Inshallah.
All right, brother. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you, man.